I speak fluent white people. My black people is pretty good, but I'm not fluent. I learned white people on Army bases when my father was a military officer. I learned black people at home, a little bit of high school. I went to an all-black college, but it's never been my native tongue. Of course, having fluency in one language and a skilled proficiency in the other did not mean that I fit into either world. I was about 14 in Morgantown, West Virginia. I was in junior high school when a white male classmate called me nigger. My fluency in language was completely immaterial to him. I had no space and no place in his world. He was happy to let me know. Years earlier, I lived in Institute, West Virginia, and I went there to elementary school there. It was a small school that was placed on a college campus. It was my first all-black school experience. One day, a friend and I were walking home from school, and then we got into a quarrel. My friend was light-skinned, kind of a cafe au lait with a lot of lait. I was, as you kind of see me now, a walnut-colored, maybe pecan. Anyway, I don't remember why we quarreled, but I remember her face contorted in anger as she looked at me and said, "You are black and ugly." This was the mid-1960s, before black had been changed into self-affirmation, a common of self-affirmation and pride. At that time, it was probably one of the worst things that one Negro could say to another. I ran home sobbing. When my classmate had called me nigger, it had been painful, it had been unnecessary, but it wasn't a surprise. I mean, my world had somewhat prepared me for that. But when my friend called me black and ugly, I had no armor to protect me against that. It took my mother's arms and a poem written by my great-grandmother to kind of calm me down. My favorite lines of the poem are, "I speak of the charms of the gentle brown arms and the eyes that reflect the sunlight." As a little black girl, those words were the first, other than things that I had heard within my family, they were the first to assure me that what I was mattered. Who I was mattered. They assure me still. In retrospect, I learned from those experiences and others like them that regardless of what people assumed when they saw me or when they heard me, I did not belong in either the black or the white world. I also learned that words can change and shape reality. What those kids said to me not only had an impact on how I understood myself, but also on my ability to navigate my environment. Regardless of whether or not I believed their characterization of me, I still had to maneuver around their perspectives and the impact those perspectives had on my life. Words have power. They impact how we think and act. And sometimes words take us down a path where we really don't want to go. Inclusion is one of those words. The latest in a long line of descriptors that help people to think about how to interact with folks who, frankly, are not like us. Inclusion is a descendant of words such as affirmative action, equal opportunity, tolerance, diversity. And it seems to suggest a state, it seems to promise a state where those who are not included finally get to come into the club. The problem is that it doesn't deliver on what it promises. When we were writing our book, Leading in Black and White, my co-author, Keith Caver, and I talked to many organizations. And talked to those organizations, and many of them talked about the wonder and power of inclusion. At the same time, they were tightly monitoring the behaviors of those who were different. We had, they would watch black managers, and those black managers who hired mostly black employees, were typically viewed with suspicion, and their hirees were often assumed to be less qualified. While white managers who hired mostly white employees were typically viewed as being, well, completely unremarkable. The thing is that inclusion suggests an openness to difference that doesn't really exist. And that's because the gatekeepers have the power to choose who gets to be included and to come in, how long they get to stay, and if maybe they need to be put out. They get to shape the behaviors of those they have included. And that's because they set the norms. And the norms are typically set for the people who, the standard of the includers, and not from the standard of those being included. That's why when I hear organizations and people talk about inclusion, frankly, I cringe. As Maxine Greene said in 1993, I keep pondering the meaning of inclusion and wondering how it can occur without the kind of normalization that wipes out difference, forcing them to be repressed, to become matters of shame rather than pride. Now, this is not just a theoretical concept. Some years ago, there was an internet meme that was going around that said that if the Voting Rights Act was not renewed, African Americans would lose the right to vote. Okay, now this was laughably incorrect. It was the 15th Amendment, not the Voting Rights Act, that gave black people the right to vote. But the fact that this meme connected with people, that they were concerned, suggests that their notion is somewhat similar to mine. And it's not just about African Americans. For example, I have some very dear friends who recently got married. It's a gay couple who lives in Washington, D.C. And soon after they got married, the political climate changed. And then, soon after they had been included into this institution, it suddenly began to feel more fragile. One of them said to me, "I'm afraid that they're going to annul our marriage." Those of us who are different live with the knowledge that gains made may not be permanent. We learn the rules and we follow them, but we're often concerned that if we bend them too much or break, we will be put out of the club. Think for a moment of former First Lady Michelle Obama. How do you think she would have been received if she wore her hair something like mine? I think my hair is neat. It doesn't muss or fuss, and you can wear it in formal and in informal occasions. But the mind kind of boggles at the idea of a first lady who wore her hair naturally or this short. Or think of a Jewish president turning on the lights of the menorah. Or a Muslim president who observed daily prayers and wore a hijab. Of course, the question is, why does this matter? Why does any of this matter? It matters because the nation and the world are changing, and the changes are so vast, and so huge that it will require all of us, to think differently. Last year, Pew Research put out a study, and it was really talking about change. For example, they talked about how the family is changing, that we have more blended families, more people are cohabitating, there are more divorces than there have been. There are more women leaders around the world, not enough, but more. They also said that by 2055, there will be no majority ethnic or religious groups in this country. Already we know that there are more biracial and multiracial marriages. The percentage of multiracial children being born is currently higher than the percentage of monoethnic children being born today. Now, to some, this new reality is almost unthinkable because it is a transgression against the rules of inclusion, the rules that demand, like a velvet hammer, that we conform to certain behaviors around look and language and love and appearance. Many of these standards, which many of us had no part in creating. It is time to change to a new language, to think beyond the language of inclusion, to find words that help us to create a new mindset so that we can build a new reality. Instead of inclusion, let's consider mutuality. Mutuality means that we all walk forward together. Nobody needs to be included because, by definition, we are already part of the group. Mutuality means that we accept difference, glory in it, expect it, learn from it, all without fear. It means that we create our norms together, that we choose the ones that we think are best for us, and that we do it along with allowing variation, and that we don't punish people in spoken and unspoken ways if they don't fit into our little kind of bubble here. So, let's begin to think then about the power of ideas. And first I would say that as we consider this idea of mutuality, It does not dismiss or take away from the problems and issues of our shared past. But what it does try to do is to give us an equal playing field where we can talk about those issues together. I know that this is an idea, but ideas are powerful things. A few years ago, I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, and there with some colleagues, we went to Gandhi Square, and we stood under the shadow of the great man's statue talking about the power of an idea. Gandhi came up with the power of nonviolent protest out of the pain of apartheid. And he took that idea and he took it home to India, where he applied it and where he had some success. And then Martin Luther King came some years later and took the idea and brought it to the States, where he had some success. And then Nelson Mandela took that idea and brought it back home, where he had some success. Gandhi's idea literally went around the world and changed old realities into new ones. Let's talk about mutuality. Let's chew on it. Let's bring people into conversations. Let's let it haunt our thoughts. Let us question ourselves ruthlessly, answer ourselves honestly, and be willing to see what can be rather than what is. This idea is just being born, and it will take all of us to be midwives, all of us to be there at its creation, all of us to put in our hopes and our perspectives, all of us to challenge and push each other. This is not going to be easy. In fact, it's going to be really hard. But when we are done, we will have created something that is ours. Something that we did mutually.